If you've been told that waking up at 2 a.m. is just part of getting older, that part is true. But the reason it's happening and the 6 foods that actually stop it have nothing to do with how much sleep you need. I hear some version of this constantly. Someone's been waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, wide awake, mind either racing or completely blank, and they've tried everything. Melatonin, earlier bedtime, no caffeine afternoon, maybe a glass of warm milk for good measure. And they're still up at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling. Not because those things don't help at all, but because they're solving the wrong problem. The issue isn't falling asleep. It's what your body is doing with a specific stress hormone, cortisol, in the middle of the night. And after 50, that story changes in a way most people never get explained to them. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what's actually happening and then give you 6 specific foods, not supplements, not prescriptions, that work directly on that pattern. Some of these are going to be familiar. At least 2 of them are going to surprise you. Let's start with the why. Cortisol has a rhythm. On a healthy day, it peaks in the morning. That's what wakes you up and gets you moving. Through the day, it gradually drops. By evening, it should be near its lowest point, and it stays there through the night. The low cortisol window is what allows your body to stay asleep. That's how it's supposed to work. After 50, the rhythm shifts. The nighttime trough gets shallower. Cortisol doesn't drop as far, doesn't stay as low as it should, and it starts rising earlier than it used to. Not at 6 or 7 in the morning, at 2, at 3, at 4 a.m. When cortisol rises, your body reads that as a signal to become alert. Not because of stress, not because of noise, because that's what cortisol does. It prepares the body for activity, nudges the heart rate up, raises wakefulness. Everything that is the opposite of staying asleep. This is why most people who wake at 2 a.m. find themselves lying there with a racing mind or vague, sourceless anxiety, even when nothing is actually wrong. The cortisol came first. The anxious thoughts came second. Your brain woke up into an elevated stress hormone and started looking for reasons to justify it. And this is where it compounds. Sleep disruption and elevated cortisol feed each other. A nationally representative study tracking 672 older adults found that sleep fragmentation, the kind that comes from waking in the middle of the night, was significantly associated with higher daytime cortisol. More fragmented sleep, higher cortisol, more fragmented sleep. Once that cycle starts, it tends to stay. And melatonin usually doesn't solve it for the same reason. Melatonin works on the falling asleep signal, the drowsy pull at bedtime. It doesn't touch the cortisol pattern that yanks you out of sleep 4 hours later, which is why people take melatonin, still wake up at 2 a.m. and assume the problem is unsolvable. It isn't. But the fix has to work on cortisol, and that's exactly what these 6 foods do. Food 1, tart cherries, specifically tart cherry juice. And I know that sounds like an oddly specific recommendation, but stay with this for a second. Most people assume tart cherries help with sleep because of their melatonin content. And yes, they do contain natural melatonin, one of the only foods that contains enough to have a measurable effect. But researchers at the University of Rochester found that when they gave tart cherry juice to older adults with insomnia, the biggest improvement wasn't in falling asleep, it was in staying asleep, specifically in the waking after sleep onset category, which is exactly the 2 a.m. problem we're talking about. The working theory is that it's not just the melatonin. Tart cherries also contain anti-inflammatory compounds called anthocyanins, that appear to reduce the inflammatory signals that keep cortisol elevated at night. The melatonin helps. The anti-inflammatory effect helps more. 8 ounces in the evening. That's the dose used in the research. Food 2, magnesium-rich foods. This one has the most direct cortisol evidence of anything on this list, and most people over 50 aren't getting enough of it. Here's the thing about magnesium. Your body uses it to regulate the stress response system. When magnesium levels drop, which happens more easily after 50 because absorption declines with age, cortisol tends to rise. The relationship goes the other way too. High cortisol depletes magnesium, so the two quietly drain each other. A double-blind clinical trial in elderly subjects gave half of them magnesium supplementation for 8 weeks. The result was a statistically significant decrease in serum cortisol, measured in the blood, not self-reported, alongside real improvements in sleep efficiency and early morning awakening. That's not a study you have to squint at. The food sources, pumpkin seeds are the highest. Dark chocolate, well, actually, let me be specific here. I mean 70% cacao or higher. Milk chocolate doesn't move the needle. Spinach, almonds, and black beans are also strong sources. The goal isn't a supplement, it's consistent dietary intake across the day. Food 3, fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, the omega-3 rich ones. Omega-3 fatty acids lower systemic inflammation. And inflammation is one of the key signals that keeps the cortisol response system activated when it should be winding down. A longitudinal study tracking over 2,700 people found that higher omega-3 levels in the blood were associated with lower cortisol and lower inflammatory markers. Measurable differences, not just correlations on a survey. 2 servings a week is the threshold most of the research points to. If you're someone who doesn't like fish or can't do it regularly, this is one area where a fish oil supplement has a reasonable evidence base. But the food sources absorb better and come with additional nutrients the supplement doesn't replicate. 3 down, 3 more to go. Food 4, chamomile and the herbal teas that work through the same pathway. Most people assume chamomile helps with sleep because of the ritual, a warm drink, a quieter evening, slowing down before bed. That's not nothing, but the actual mechanism is more specific. Chamomile contains a compound called apigenin, which binds to GABA receptors in the brain. GABA is your nervous system's braking system, the signal that slows neural activity when it's time to rest. And crucially, GABA activity directly pushes back against the alerting effect of cortisol. That makes it different from melatonin in an important way. Melatonin manages the falling asleep signal. GABA manages the suppression of wakefulness. When cortisol rises in the early morning hours, GABA activity is what counteracts it, and chamomile supports that counteraction. Lemon balm and passion flower work through the same pathway. Any of the 3 are solid evening options. The goal isn't sedation, it's giving your nervous system the support it needs to stay in the quieter state required to remain asleep. Food 5, dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, Swiss chard. These connect directly back to the magnesium point. They're among the highest whole food sources you can get, and whole food sources absorb better than most supplements, especially as gut absorption changes with age. But there's an additional mechanism worth knowing. Dark leafy greens are also high in folate and B6, both required for your body to convert tryptophan into serotonin and serotonin into melatonin. That conversion pathway is how your body makes its own sleep hormone. After 50, B vitamin absorption declines. The pathway slows quietly. Most people never connect what they're eating to whether their body can produce enough of its own melatonin. A cup of sautéed spinach at dinner. Kale worked into something you're already making. Not a dietary overhaul, just a consistent source of the raw materials your sleep chemistry depends on. Food 6, ashwagandha. I'm calling this a food because you can add it to things you're already eating or drinking. Warm milk before bed is the traditional preparation, or blended into a morning smoothie, or stirred into oatmeal. Technically, it's an herbal supplement, but I'd be leaving the most directly relevant thing off this list by skipping it. Of everything here, ashwagandha has the strongest evidence specifically for cortisol reduction. A systematic review covering 7 randomized controlled trials and 491 adults found consistent, significant reductions in serum cortisol, perceived stress, sleeplessness, and fatigue compared to placebo, across multiple studies, not just one. Unlike most of the other foods on this list, which work on cortisol indirectly through inflammation, sleep quality, or precursor nutrients, ashwagandha works directly on the body's stress response control system. It helps regulate the mechanism that decides how much cortisol gets produced in the first place. The effective dose in the research is 500 to 600 milligrams per day. The full effect builds over 6 to 8 weeks. It isn't fast, but it addresses the root of the problem more directly than anything else on this list. That's all 6. It's not just the tiredness. Most people adapt to the tiredness. After enough months of broken sleep, exhausted becomes the new normal. They stop measuring it because they've forgotten what not exhausted feels like. What doesn't adapt, what chronic sleep disruption quietly takes, is presence. Think about a specific moment, dinner with someone you care about, a conversation with your spouse, your kids, your grandchildren. You're sitting right there, but you're not fully in it. You're half tracking what they're saying. You're irritable over something small, and you know, even in the moment, that it isn't really about the small thing. You want to be engaged. You just can't quite get there. Not because you don't care, because your brain has been running on fragmented sleep and elevated cortisol for months, and it doesn't have what it needs to be fully present. That's what this is actually costing. The people in front of you getting a shorter temper, a distracted listener, a version of you that's physically there but miles away, and you knowing it and not understanding why you can't fix it. You can fix it, not with more discipline, not with a prescription, with specific nutrients that work on the actual biological mechanism keeping you awake at 2 a.m., the cause, not just the symptom. That puts these 6 foods in a different category from everything else most people have already tried. Pick 2 from this list, the ones easiest to add to what you're already eating. Start there. Give it 2 to 3 weeks and notice what shifts, not just in your sleep, in how you feel when you wake up, in how long your patience actually lasts, in how much of yourself shows up for the people who deserve all of it. That's where you'll notice it first. If this video was useful, share it and subscribe. There's more of this kind of content coming. Pick 2. Start tonight.